recording.
Are we okay to get started? Okay. All right, my name is Jerry Abbott, and looks like I'll be giving the invocation today, and then, is Seth here yet? Christopher, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance in Seth's absence?
He told us he would be here. We do have a quorum, so we can start, but I mean, if you want to ask someone else to do it, you also can do that.
Yeah, I just had Chris.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for all the many blessings thou hast given us, and grateful for the opportunity which we have to meet here as a community, and ask thy Spirit to be with us and with those who are presenting, and that we can be able to make those decisions which are appropriate for our community. And please bless our nation and those who lead us and those who defend us. And these things we ask and pray humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. At this time, we'll open up the floor for anybody that wants to present something to the commission that is not on the agenda for tonight. Okay, we'll close that. Let's see. First item of business, we'll do consent items for approval of the minutes for March 23rd, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the regular planning commission on March 23rd, 2021.
I second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, first item of business is a public hearing for the preliminary plat of Sunrise Farm. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing to consider a request by Patterson Development for a preliminary plat approval for Sunrise Farm, a proposed 10-lot single-family subdivision located approximately at 11241 North, 6000 West, and then we'll make an appropriate action after we hear our presentation from Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Like Chairman Abbott said, this is for just the northern end of the Longhorn property. This is not the entire Longhorn property, but just that northern parcel that this plat is for. It is currently zoned R140, and the request is to keep it as R140. And on the general plan, it is designated as low-density residential. This is the preliminary plat that was submitted. It is over, that large parcel is 13.59 acres, and there are 10 single-family lots in the subdivision, and the lot sizes range from 23,175 square feet to 40,325. This meets the density requirements in R140 that allows, you take the total square footage and divide that by 40,000, and it tells you how many lots you can do. And then they're allowed 25% of those lots to be between 20,000 and 30,000 lots, and so that gives them 2 to be able to be between the 20,000 and 30,000, and that's exactly what they have. And that parcel on the southern end right there, it's noted as parcel A for future development, and that's a 4.41 acre parcel. Obviously, that means there will be no homes built on it at this time. Anything built on it will have to get approval in the future. The accesses, the main access is from 6,000 west that you see that labeled there on the right side of the screen. The road is longer than 600 feet, which would require a cul-de-sac, but because it's a connection for future development, we require a temporary turnaround just for public safety. And also to note, they also have met the 130 minimum width at the setback line for the frontage. Citizen participation, the appropriate notices were sent out for this public hearing, as you see all these people that are here, with the 500-foot radius of the subject property. And those notices were also sent out to the paper and posted on our websites. And we did receive one formal letter, which was emailed to the Planning Commission along with a few explanations about what is administrative and what is not. And we, as staff, recommend that the Planning Commission hold this public hearing and accept the findings and recommend approval of the proposed plat. I did email the commissioners that updated plat, which they gave me on the 26th, so just a day ago. And so I did, it's a little difficult to see on the screen, but I did update that so that the final plat is in substantial conformance with that plat rather than the one we received in March, just to ensure that those changes are put into the final plat submittal. And Ken Berg, the engineer working on the project, is also here if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
So what are the requirements for that turnaround? Is it going to be paved or is it rock?
It's asphalt.
It is asphalt?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And my understanding, they're just meeting the existing zoning at this part. This isn't part of a rezone.
Uh-huh, that is correct. It's all R140 standards.
And so just to be clear, this is an administrative process, and unless there's some kind of a code or other issue, this will move forward to council.
That is correct.
Okay. And I assume we open this for public comment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
I haven't received any cards. Are we receiving cards? Is there anybody that wants to, or do we just raise hands and?
Yeah, I would just call people up one by one and be fine.
Just real quick, how many people are going to want to address by raise a hand? Okay. All right, at this time we'll open it up unless, I'm sorry, do the commissioners have any questions for for engineering or anybody?
I actually do have one. So Kelly, did we resolve just the slight changes in the lot sizes to make sure that they comply?
Yes, we did. It was compliant as is, but I did have him send me the actual measurements at the setback line, and it does meet the standards.
Okay, good job. Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for public hearing, and if you just come up to the pulpit, just state your name and where you live, and then if we could also avoid repeating things that were said by previous people, we'll go ahead and open it up. Day, you want to come on up?
My name, excuse me, my name is Day Christensen. I live in the Bull River development. I have a 4.5 acre lot that is abuts this development just to the west of the development. I believe I sent a letter with some history and just some comments. I realize this isn't a zone change or anything, and so it's just R140, but you were asking for comments, so I thought I would make some comments. Over the last 10 years, Patterson has submitted a series of different proposals for the development of all that property. in most of those plans, he has shown it with a much higher density than what is currently zoned at. So a lot of the comments that I was making have reference to what appears to be their intention in the long run, even though it may not apply directly to this subdivision. In 2018, on the proposal they presented at that time, the homeowners along Gamble Oak, which abuts the property, we discussed what our interests were, and I included that letter in the information to you. But one of the main item people were interested in was having some kind of a wall that would make a transition from the higher density that he was proposing to our very low density in Bull River, where our smallest lots are 2 acres. And one of the primary reasons for that wall is our concern about safety, because Bull River's intention is to keep as much natural vegetation, and we have a number of natural ponds that are there. It makes it a very attractive area for children to want to explore, and our concern is their safety in that kind of a situation. And also then there were some other items listed as far as just helping to make a transition from a high density to a very low density. So ideally, that wall would extend onto this border also. But I think that would be dependent on probably the developers.
On this map, can you like point out where you're wanting this divider?
Yeah, it would be the west property there.
Thank you.
Yeah, all along there. Yeah. Oh, is there, I don't, oh, you're looking at here. I'm looking at here. Okay, yeah. So, we also at that time had requested, especially if the idea that there would be a higher density, that the homes abutting our boundary would just be 1 story high. There was a ravine that used to exist that went from there to the east, and that ravine was filled with a lot of concrete rubble and other debris. And I included a photograph of what it looks like from my property. And it's, at the top, it's about 100 feet wide, and I would guess it's maybe a 30-foot drop from the upper area down to the lower part of the ravine on my property. So.
And just real quick, didn't they add something onto the plat to address that?
Yeah, it's not on the plat directly, but it is on the civil plans to submit to engineering, just saying that it would be removed and regraded.
Okay. So that did get added after your letter to take all that out?
Yeah. In the 2018 proposal, they were showing a small mini park in that location. And I don't have any problem with the mini park, but again, the concern would be an area that attracts children, and then being able to flow, see the ponds that are on my property and be drawn into that area and stuff. The only other 2 items are, we also are, in Bull River, we don't have street lights. And so nighttime is a very nice time because of our low density and everything. And so when lights are installed that are not directed or downlit, it impacts us quite a bit and stuff.
Do our current codes address any lighting, like dark sky or no shielded down? Or?
The design requirements do require that there is a street light at every intersection and every 300 feet on local residential roads. But correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, I don't think we have like make sure that it's this kind of light bulb and
So the
down
developer
right there,
could
but-
choose to put it down on his own. He could choose to do,
yes.
which I would prefer if I had one of those lights or one of those streets.
Right.
So, okay.
And then my only final comment had to do with the sewer easement that is, as I understand it, needs to run to the south, and that it would be in a road alignment. So there my concern has to do with, that's establishing where a street is going to be before a plan for that area is approved. And so my concern then is it limits what the flexibility is in future meetings if they are coming in asking for a higher density or something like that. So, and in the plan that they submitted in response to that, I know in one area, it's showing a different alignment than in their 2018 plans, where it gets much closer to our, to Gamble Oak. And so I don't know if their intention is to have that be open space or, yeah, I don't know what their intention for that area is because it isn't showing any lots on that. We've always been very anxious to work with the Patterson development, and they've been very gracious in having discussions with us. So I'm not wanting to come across like I want conflict. These are just issues that would minimize the impact that it might have on our development. So, are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Neil Evans. I've lived in Highland for like 36 years. I pass this property 8 or 10 times a day. So I'm very familiar with what is there. And just getting to know this in just the last few days, what some of their intentions are. But in my view, the only way this meets the R140 zoning is if you include the 4.5 acres that they say is for future development. We've got lot sizes there that are from just over half an acre to less than an acre. And the only way that it meets the zoning requirement that I see is if you include what they say is future development. You know, I'm not opposed necessarily to what they have here, but I think we want to be aware this is an attempt, just that we see on a federal level and a state level. If they can't get their intention met initially, they'll break this into pieces. Now, I just want to let Highland City and say again, we want to be aware of what's going on with all what's south of there. What's going to happen to the other 4.41 acres comes in when they come in and they want that in considerably different, similar to what they presented to us 2 years ago. My concern as a Highland resident is we all knew Highland was an R140 zoning as we came here. They have known this for ages. I've been personal friends with James and Wayne and worked with them, with each of them, and lived next to them as neighbors for years. And I have nothing against any of the Pattersons. But when I look at the Pattersons, I don't know that any of them are current Highland residents. I think we need to protect what our city is. My concern is that we have known for quite some time that we have about 1/3 of the acreage in Highland that is undeveloped still. That is going to be developed, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But they should be developed in the same manner that we have developed thus far. And I've seen small zoning come in, what we have happening over by the developmental center, what we have happening next to my home. that was just put in here a couple of years ago is far away from R140 zoning. So I hope that as you look at this, that you call that 4.41 acres. If you're going to include that and say it's R140 zoning, you better be aware of what's going to happen to you as they come back to you in the future. And I know that you can't predict what's going to happen, but I'll guarantee to you that all of that south of there is going to come back, and you're going to see what you had presented to you here 2 years ago. And is that what we want Highland City to be? We don't need it to be a Provo Main Street. We don't need it to be an Orem Boulevard. We need it to be Highland. And we don't have to present every type of zoning that we see in the cities around us. We're about a 6 square mile area of city. Whatever people want in this city, or what some want to bring into this city, is on our borders. We don't have to continue to offer all of that within our 6 square miles. So I'm just saying, be careful of what you're doing, because it's going to come back to bite you. Thank you.
Sorry, just a question though. You made a comment stating that there are some lots that are below 0.5. Which of those have you identified?
Well, the 20, when we talk lot sizes range from 23, that's close to half acre. When you go from 23 to 40, how many of those are 23? How many of those are close to the half acre?
2.
And when you take in the other 4.41 acres, is that what's making up the R140 zone? And are you committing, when you say future development, what does future development mean? Does that mean they can come back and say something different? I know that Highland City has been opposed to future park areas in our subdivisions. If that were committed as a park area, but then that commits me to have to go back in and take care of it. What we're doing here, I think, affects all of us, not just necessarily the people that are coming in to live there. Thank you.
So Kelly, does this not meet the R140?
I was just going to talk a little bit about that, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, is that I actually calculated out based on just what the lots are. I subtracted out the acreage of parcel A just to kind of see the density of where the lots actually are. And I think I explained to y'all previously, with the 13.59 acres, they're allowed to have 14 lots. But then if you take out the acreage, the 4.41 acres from parcel A, and just take that square footage and divide it by the 40,000, they're allowed 10 lots. And so even just that alone follows R140 standards. And then as a developer, they are permitted to have an open parcel like that as long as the actual residential lots follow R140 standards, and they do density-wise, and then allowing that no more than 25% between 20,000 and 30,000 square feet is also permitted and part of the regulations of the R140 zone.
So according to that calculation, how many more could they put in that parcel A?
They, 4.
And if I might, just to clarify, of those 4, they could only have one that is less than the 30,000.
That is correct. With a minimum of 20,000.
So because parcel A is part of this plat, does that lock in the zoning for that parcel?
No, because you can always rezone any residential lot. You can always request to rezone anything.
So they could come in and try to rezone parcel A?
Yes,
With-
but again, that would be a legislative process. It would have public hearings at both Planning Commission and City Council, and so everyone would be able to have the right to put their input in, and the council also has the right to say yes or no at that point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Hello there, Josh Little. I just have a comment and a question. We own the property to the northeast corner, and we have particular interest in what happens to this land because the unique situation of our property and the facing of our home faces south, southeast, or southwest, so our front yard is basically the backyard of these homes. So we walk out our front door to whatever happens here. We've seen many proposals that have been mentioned over time, and this proposal we're generally in favor of. This is what we expected, or to happen. And after seeing proposals of the past, it's actually what we hoped then would happen. So we're generally in favor. I just have one question about the fencing requirement. Is there a fencing requirement, and what would that be?
So when it comes to fencing requirement, it's called a screen wall if there's like high density that needs a wall next to it, and that is only required if the high density is 6 units per acre or more, and then a screen wall would be required between the higher density and the low density. So if their proposal in the future comes out to be more than 6 units per acre, that's what would be required of the developer.
So that means there's no requirement for a fence at the back side
Along
of
the
the property?
R140, no.
Is that right? Huh?
That would be up to the property owners unless the developer wanted to do that himself, but
But it's not a requirement.
that is correct.
I would just like to submit that as a concern, given existing property and because then my front yard is directly walking into their backyard, which would be kind of awkward.
Right.
We hope that doesn't happen.
We hope they put up a fence, that's.
Yeah, we hope they put up a fence. If not, I guess we can, right?
Yeah, you can do it together.
Yeah, we can do it together. Yeah, that'll be our first joint project. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody else? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up to our commissioners. Claude, you want to start us off? Do you have any questions or comments?
No, not at this time.
Audrey?
So is someone from Patterson here? Yes. Okay, I was just going to ask, could you enlighten us on parcel A and how it's going to be maintained, and just curious what your plans are for maintaining that with the other phase on the other side of the road being done?
Yeah, so if you can go back to the aerial view, Kelly.
Oops.
The intended purpose right now for parcel A is it will continue to be, they will set up some fencing and include it with the rest of the acreage that the Longhorns currently are on, and they'll continue to farm that piece. Their intent was to have the 10 lots that bordered the adjacent residential to give the acre zoning, the R140 zoning, and we're still working on what the next proposal will be.
Oh, so currently, so then from, while this phase is developed and after, until you have your next thing proposed, it's Longhorns, right? Thank you.
And is there a HOA on those 10 homes? Probably not.
It's just a standard subdivision.
They build whatever they want.
Yes.
I have a practical question about the road that comes into 6000 West. Is it going to be curb on both sides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not like the road that is to the east, where it's sort of this half-baked, funny little lane thing that has no curb and gutter on it?
No, so
Okay.
the road that's proposed, it will have the full roadway cross-section. Probably the sidewalk on the south side will not be constructed, but the road will actually be a road from day one, so.
And so will there actually be curbing that comes around from the west to the south? That might be a peculiar way of asking it. I just want to make sure that both sides of the road as it enters onto 6000 West
Yes.
will have some
That
sort
whole
of curbing
intersection will be improved.
done properly. Okay.
We will not improve the other side of the road.
Yeah,
no.
you're just
No, I understand, but
Property.
just the part that comes out will be.
Yes.
And then what about along 6,000 West, so between Josh's property, coming all the way down to the intersection? So on the far east side?
The improvements along 6,000 is part of this development, and it would be improved along that whole property line, along with the trail, and I think your standard cross-section requires a fence along that, along 6,000 West.
So trail or sidewalk, this continuing on 6,000?
I believe it's a trail.
I
is
think
what
it's
is
a
shown.
sidewalk, because I use it all the time, right? Right,
Yeah, it's just the sidewalk.
okay. Yeah, because that's usually my running path. Okay.
Cool.
Just to clarify, the parkway detail, like, it wouldn't be the 29-foot parkway detail that we have along Alpine Highway and like the UDOT roads. It would just be our standard, the like 4-foot park strip and 5-foot sidewalk, that type of thing.
Right. And then a fence, right?
Uh-huh.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Good. How about you? Any questions?
Oh, I also do want to mention, Mr. Chairman, that Seth is actually on Zoom now, so just,
Okay.
yeah.
Anything, Chris?
I just want to tell the rest of the folks on the planning commission, I actually live next to Ann's property, so just immediately east. And a lot of the folks that are here are neighbors of ours. And this is really more a comment for, not so much for the planning commission, but for all of our neighbors. I don't see anybody having a desire to have that 4-acre parcel turned into, R1 tiny. So the assumption or presumption would be that that's going to remain, and it will have to remain that way unless the group comes back and says we want to rezone it, which should involve a more formal process.
Okay, Seth, do you have any comments?
That was actually my question as well. So that was going to remain part of this subdivision and go into the calculation for the R140 qualification. And it would have to be, if they decided to do something different, more dense later, then it would have to come back for rezone.
Correct. Patterson can come back and present whatever they want to present on that property, and it goes through our process and then to the city council, just like it has in the past. And I live in Bull River. Dave's one of my neighbors. Yeah, Dave?
Dave, if you could, yeah.
Since the question came up about the 4.5-acre parcel, how that was going to be maintained, since I'm wondering, the piece that then abuts me, that
Oh, the little wedge over
where the
there.
ravine is, what is the intention for that? I'm assuming, because it's going through, that the grading, the cleaning up of all the rubble and stuff will take place at this point. So, but is it going to be landscaped? Is it going to be weeds? I mean, it's been the graveyard for the longhorn cattle, and so I'm just curious to know what the intention for that is.
I'm assuming it's going to be left just natural and then fenced so that the cows don't go down in there. Is that right? I doubt it'll be. Are you going to landscape that?
Not at this point.
Right.
Are you planning to grade it? To
That's what's shown on the construction drawing.
Is it?
Yes, we
Okay.
grade it.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. And so I know that a lot of the things Dave brought up in his letter that was sent to all of us, those were all things we talked about with Patterson's if they go through a rezone. Those are all kind of negotiate, those are some of the advantages of a rezone versus just, if they go with the existing zoning, we just go through basically the administrative process as long as they check all the boxes, they have the right to develop that property for that. And I hope it's all R140, but I've seen a lot of other products that work that are lower density but actually feel greater. So, you know, we're always open to any presentation that any landowner would bring before us. But this process is a little bit different, so.
Can
All right,
I
hey,
say
yeah.
one thing? Just because we actually have some good participation today. I just know that Utah has a mandate that all the cities produce more affordable income housing. That needs to happen. And we all know the complexities of that happening with Silicon Flats and the real estate market right now. So we also are always supposed to keep in mind how we can accommodate and make that happen, because each city is, with some complexities, are supposed to comply and come up with that within a time frame. So that's something our whole state is working on.
Yeah, and currently Highland is working towards making apartment rentals a lot easier to get. We used to have to do 2 meters, 2 everything, split utilities, and now they don't allow for that, and that qualifies. And then we're also looking at avenues of doing, I call them ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, that you can put on your own. Because a lot of us have 2-acre lots, and you can put a guest suite on there that also qualifies in that category. And then, of course, we can meet it with rental properties, so.
Are you talking about a detached ADU?
Yes. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that, and do I have a motion? You want to put the motions up there,
Yes.
Sure.
Kelly?
And
I'm-
sorry, just to clarify that little comment, it's currently ADUs need to be attached to.
Correct. No, I said we're working towards that
Okay.
part. Those are other avenues. We don't have to go low density in all of our remaining
Yes.
properties. Okay. Christopher?
Sure. I move that the Planning Commission accept the findings and recommend approval of the Sunrise Farms preliminary plat, subject to the 3 stipulations recommended by staff.
I second the motion.
Okay, you want us to do a roll call on that? Claude?
Yes.
Audrey?
Yes.
Eno?
Yes.
Krista?
Yes.
Seth?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Glad we cleared up that 7 thing.
I know, I'm so sorry about that one. I didn't even update it on the PowerPoint. That just kind of shows. I'm very detail oriented.
Okay, number 4, we have the public hearing text amendment on fence, walls, and hedges. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing to consider a request by Highland City staff to amend section 3-612 fences, walls, and hedges of the Highland City Development Code. And I'll turn it over to Becky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. This would work. Okay, a bit of background. I have had a difficult time with this section, and so that's why this is here. In 2020, there were 46 fence permits that were issued, and so far in 2021, I've received 16 applications. I'm still working on a couple of the reviews, but I added that note just today, just because I had 5 calls and visits today about the fence ordinance, and that wasn't in regards to this public hearing. It was just wanting to get clarifications on what the code meant. And it, in the past, has been confusing for both residents and developers. I've had experiences, and so has Joanne, which is she's our public works secretary, just with developers being confused as to why they have to follow this when they see that they only need this, and it's just like, no, that doesn't apply to you, this is only for residents. And it's just, it's a piece of our code that is complicated and not very easy to read, and that's why we as staff just felt it was necessary to kind of rewrite it. Almost, I'll go through the changes we have made, but most of it really is just rewording and reorganizing to make what is intended with our code clear, was the point of this. So this is just a little table. The left is our current, our current code is, and then the right is in the proposal or the proposed amendment. That first bit is just in the current code with the sections. It's split up into a permit required, and then general, and then materials and design, and retaining walls. And I actually went here, and I was going to go more into depth in each one, but they were just so complicated that I couldn't make normal bullet points without just writing out the code. And then in the proposed amendment, which I did work with our city attorney going back and forth with different reviews, and so just we have the city attorney's report or support on this amendment as well. But this would be changing the section headings to, well, basically the first point is just what's subject to review, and then it's split up between fences, retaining walls, theme walls, and screen walls. So theme walls and screen walls are for developers, and then the fences are for residents, and then retaining walls are for residents, and then when developers build retaining walls, it's applicable to them too, just for regrading purposes. And then basically, since coming here, it's been understood that chain link is a prohibited material for fences, but I've had experiences where residents have come to me saying, it's not prohibited in the code, and then I'll go to the code and be like, okay, because basically it explicitly states that chain link is prohibited for theme walls and screen walls, and then it says for fences, these materials are permitted, but then it doesn't explicitly prohibit chain link. And we've spoken to council members, and they agree that chain link is prohibited, and that's something that's understood to them too. And so I thought it important to add it as a prohibited material for every type of fence. And then the next one is a request that I got from the Public Works guys as well as the engineering department, just to have a height max. That verbiage I actually got from the Alpine Cities Development Code to have a 9-foot max, and we just went through with Public Works, and they agreed that that would be sufficient for what they're expecting.
So you're saying that the 9 foot includes the fence and the retaining wall?
That is correct, and that's measured because currently the maximum height for a retaining wall is 8 feet, and then maximum height for a fence is 6 feet. And currently with the code, you can have an 8-foot retaining wall with a 6-foot fence on top of it in the same vertical plane. And so you have a 14-foot wall that can be right up by a sidewalk, essentially. And so our guys were having a fit about it as to how that could be possibly allowed to have a 14-foot wall right next to a sidewalk.
We have it in one of our backyards in Bull River.
I do know about that.
Kelly,
Yes.
It's the concern from the engineer, the safety of the height or the aesthetics
Yes,
of the height?
the safety of it. Like, obviously, I look more at aesthetics, but Public Works and engineering look at safety and
Sure.
see it as a
So can you still
safety
go with the
concern.
retaining wall, but as long as you step it back?
Yes, you have to step it in 4 feet to be able to have a 6-foot fence on that retaining wall. And so you can still have an 8-foot retaining wall, you just have to have the fence stepped in 4 feet. And on the current code, even with retaining walls, if they have a retaining wall with another retaining wall next to it, it has to be set in with a ratio of 1-to-1. And so if they have another 4-foot retaining wall, it has to be set in 4 feet. Or if it's another 6-foot retaining wall, it has to be set in 6 feet. And so we basically already have this for retaining wall on retaining wall, but we don't have it for fence. And so it's just adding that verbiage. If you think it should be set back more in or less, we can discuss that.
But are you saying it can be the full height as long as it's a view fence?
Say that one more time.
So you can do the high retaining wall and the 6-foot fence as long as the fence is a view fence?
If it's an open fence, yes, Yes,
Well,
that was the exception.
So, but structurally, I don't see any difference if you have a retaining wall which is built already to support a 2x in terms of ground force, right? If I put a fence on top of it and we're concerned that the wind, and that's why I can be you, right? The wind can blow that fence off, that's a different problem than having safety, right? Because I understand if we have by a sidewalk, like you were mentioning, that someone builds a wall that is not retaining, it's just a wall, and then on top they put a fence, definitely there is a concern.
Yeah, they can't do that.
They cannot do that, okay.
No, they cannot do that.
The code is for aesthetics. It's not an engineer. You can put a solid fence on top of a 14. You guys are setting it back, because you're allowing a view fence. You're just setting it back for
For a
aesthetics.
solid fence,
For aesthetics.
for
It's not a
aesthetics.
structural thing.
The comment was, it was.
Public Works talked about it as a safety issue. I mean, you can talk about it both ways. I can see it both ways, but.
That's what I'm trying to wrap my head, and I was talking to Kelly prior to the meeting, because like I think my subdivision is built on top of the hill. When the developer came, he built a retaining wall for all of us, right? So, and none of us put a fence, minus me. So when they're gonna build behind us, I'm thinking that that property owner will have to give up 4 feet of his property to build a fence between us, when historically, since the retaining wall is an engineer wall, you can build on top of it, right? So that's what I struggle to understand the safety behind it. I mean, if there is a aesthetics, or we're concerned people building this natural wall that to create privacy, I understand the reasoning, but in terms of safety, I'm struggling to.
Well, I thought you have to fence it if it's over a certain height so somebody doesn't fall off the end of it. Is that not a code here?
Is it, Nathan? I don't- You have to
Yeah,
put a
building
fence
code,
there?
yeah.
Yeah, building code, if
Okay,
you're
building
over
code.
30, anything over 30 inches has to have railing.
Okay.
So 3-foot retaining wall, I don't know.
How does this impact existing people with chain link fence?
Basically everything that's there, and this was the same way when the other fence ordinance was put in, is things like that are grandfathered in until they try to change it. And so even, there are plenty of chain link fences in Highland that have been there for 20 years. And once they come in and try to change it to a precast or something like that, that's when we have to bring it to compliance. But it's not like we go around and say, now you can't have that. That's not how it works until they want to change it.
Would just impact new fences.
Go forward.
Okay, I guess I'll just keep going. In our current code, it does state that, so on a side yard, it has to be, like the fence along the side has to be 14 feet from the curb, but then it does say it can go up to 6 feet from the curb if it's 66% open. And I've gotten with several different fence permits where that 6 foot is basically in the middle of the sidewalk or in the park strip because of our current park strip requirements. And so I just adjusted it to also say that it cannot go past the property line, just to clarify that they can't have it on our park strip. And then I also added a note just to reference people to the athletic court section for athletic court fencing, because there are different regulations with that and setbacks for that. And then I also drew up and added those typical and corner lot illustrations. Those are actually the illustrations I made for the help sheet that we hand out to residents for them to get a better understanding of what is in the code. And so just thought it best to just put it in the code. And that's just a little bit more into detail of the outline of the proposal. Just basically, it's just matching like fences. You go into general regulations, and then materials and design, it's both permitted and then prohibited. And then those lot consideration illustrations, and then section 3 for retaining walls, and then 4 Theme walls, just the two sections where it would be required, and then the materials and design requirements, and then same thing for screen walls. And those are just the images. It specifies that about everything within the front setback on the side lot lines can only be 3 feet tall, and then our typical maximum of 6 feet along the property lines and behind the front setback.
Can I ask a question really quick on that?
Yeah.
So we're having some discussion about, you know, if they have the retaining wall and then you put a fence on top of it. Is the Public Works not liking this or for the sake of utilities being in the back of lots? Or I just am trying to understand why they can't have fencing to the back and then you have dead space that people won't take care of and then you have all that problem.
So if people want a retaining wall behind, like on the lot line or in the PUE, they have to get approval from the city engineer, and they have to pay to put conduits in there. So then the public utility companies have access into it, and it does specify that in there as well. So when they apply for their building permit, they have to get it designed by a licensed engineer and get the city engineer's approval to put them there. And so they can't just put it there because they want to.
But if
They
they're
have to get
moving
city
in
approval.
and there is a retaining wall already and they're, you know, butting up against this retaining wall and they've moved in and it's being developed, I was just curious what their options were and if the utility and Public Works had anything to do with it. I'm trying to understand why.
Like if the retaining wall is approved with the development. Nathan, how would you address that? Like if the developer puts in a retaining wall, like on the boundaries of the subdivision, and then they come in and want to put in fences, do you think that would apply to them too? Like the height maximum?
Excuse me, so retaining wall is approved that a developer puts in, is approved with the civil plans. And so you would be looking at any standards that apply to a retaining wall would also apply to that wall. Does that make sense?
So those conduits would have to be put in before then
Yeah, and so
anyway.
I'm trying to understand why the person who's moving into this undeveloped lot that butts up against the retaining wall in the rear is what's in my head. They would have to have a 4-foot setback of dead space that's not kept. I would think that would be more of a problem for Public Works.
Only if it's a solid fence. They could put a view fence up and put it all the way to the back.
So one of the challenges you have with retaining walls is low side and high side, okay? And the complaints that we get is the low side, right? So somebody comes in and they build their pad up and they want to put retaining walls up. And then this guy here is all of a sudden looking at a 10, 12, 14-foot wall. And that's where we get the complaints. And so the idea here behind the setback is that this person here isn't looking at a straight 12, 14-foot wall. He's looking at a wall here, step back, then a wall, and a step back. That's the idea.
And I was thinking about it in reverse. What if you have somebody done that, they've built a retaining wall, you're now finishing it up. I was just thinking about both parties' rights on their property.
Right.
And if you have a drop-off, you're going to want to keep your kids from the drop-off, right? So you're going to want to put a fence, and it's probably, but you know.
Right.
Just wondering what that is.
Nathan, in the situation you described also, if my lot it's not level, right, and I want to go there, and just like you said, and raise it up, I still need to pull permit for that, correct? Because I'm moving ground. So is there something that can be addressed at that time rather than restricting the retaining wall plus fence?
Well, if you don't restrict it, then they can do however they want. And most of the time, where we deal with this is up north, when you have the natural grade drops. That's where we deal with it the most. Down here, it's usually a 2-foot,
right,
3-foot, where people are dealing with grades and stuff like that, and it's not as of a challenge. We could, if I can find it, I can show you one where there's where we have that exact issue where a guy is basically staring at a 12-foot wall outside his side.
But they need this to be able to
to enforce the other one. Okay.
We haven't received any written correspondence from any residents after the public hearing notice was sent out. And we as staff just recommend that the Planning Commission accept the findings and recommend approval of the proposed amendment. And if y'all have any additional questions, we can talk about those as well.
And do we open this up for public?
Yes, you do need to.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up to the public if anybody wants to make a comment.
I don't have anyone online, so.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and we'll entertain a motion. I have a comment. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Gordon Lonsdale, I live in Highland, near Lone Peak High School. This 9 feet total of the things together, not that I'm dealing with it right now, but is there some reason they came up with 9 feet?
It was what is stated in Alpine City Development Code, and so I just took the words and presented it to Public Works and our city engineer, and they felt it was sufficient. So that's where that came from.
Because I'm kind of agreeing with you, Audrey, and I understand what you're saying about the view fence, but is there any way we could change that wording to be 10 feet?
I mean, if the Planning Commission would like to request to amend it or request that the City Council approve it that way, they have full right to do so.
Why do you want the extra foot?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, why do you want the extra foot?
Because, well, just depending on what size your retaining wall is, and say you need a 6 foot fence. If you're 3.5 feet or you're 4 feet, I think 1 foot could be a difference between having to set your fence back 4 feet or being able to put it on the edge. I think I would love to see it be 10 feet.
Okay. All right. Any other? Thank you.
Because it seems like, obviously, it's not as much about safety as it is about somebody having a huge wall in their backyard, which I think a 10-foot fence, combination of the two would be okay. So, okay, thank you.
All right, Claude, do you have any comments, questions for the committee?
Well, now when builders and property owners come in, they will be able to understand this completely and not have a lot of questions.
That's the goal. I hope so.
Good, good.
Audrey, how about you? Any more?
Yeah, I'm still struggling with the 4 feet setback on retaining wall, 4 feet, and fence. Only because for those property that already exist, I feel a little bit unfair that those people, they're gonna lose 4 feet of perhaps 200, 300 feet of their backyard, right? I understand the concern around people building massive privacy wall. And I'm thinking if, I don't know, even reducing that setback to 2 feet, if that will make any difference, or less. So that's
Christopher?
I think that's a really good point. To me, this is just a cosmetic thing. And so if I was the recipient of the bottom part, which is really the sort of ugly, you've brought up the issue of if you're the owner on the top property, you won't want to go whack off, a couple of 1,000 square feet of your property. If we're trying to minimize ugliness, I don't know if it minimizes the ugliness to have a retaining wall, and then if there are fences, that they just are see-through rather than, a solid cement block. But that's...
But the person in the back can't really look into their backyard if it's a view fence, because they're down here anyways.
Yeah, and it's not so much, it's more just the cosmetic thing. This is really beauty in the eye of the beholder. There isn't a right answer to this, but just trying to think of a way where we could compromise to allow the
Because it changes whether you can have pets, it changes with small children, it changes,
Yes.
how you're allowed to do your yard as well. And I get the issue, 4 feet seems like a whole lot of yard.
Yeah,
Sorry, do you mind if I make one comment?
No, please.
I feel like, at least thinking about if kids were to climb up onto the retaining wall or walk on the other side of the fence, I think you should either do no setback or a 4-foot setback. I would not go to 2, only because if kids were walking on that, or even if I was walking on that and it was an 8-foot retaining wall, I would feel safer having 4 feet of walking room or 3.5 rather than just 2. But I mean, you can look both ways.
So my 2 cents is there shouldn't be any retaining walls over 4 feet to begin with. That a developer should try harder not to just flat grade his entire property. I'm in Flagstaff, there's no grading. You build to the topography because people want to maintain their, I mean, we're driving through neighborhoods and we're seeing 10-foot. Why? Step it. Drop the community, you know, do 4-foot increments throughout the community instead of all in one spot. And then it's nothing over 4 feet. That makes the whole area look better. They do have to try a little harder. And then they could put up whatever, you know, fence they want to put up on the back of that, because then that'll total the 10 feet or whatever. So I do see, I mean, it is kind of a hard thing to look at when you're talking about that 4 feet, because the other big complaint you get is, why aren't the weeds being cut in our open space?
That's what I was thinking about.
Why are these big thorn thistle things growing and they're spreading seeds on my property now? And you know, you're going to get that. It's like you're trading one complaint for another complaint. I mean, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of, if you're going to go above 4 feet, it needs to be a view fence, you know, or something like that. Go ahead. What's your name?
Listening to you, that was my concern. If you had to do any maintenance on the fence or the property.
Can you say your name and address?
Steve Sander, I live in Dry Creek. I was just thinking, I mean, I don't have that situation in my residence, so I was just imagining, okay, if you have a retaining wall that's high, and then you had to get around there to do any maintenance on that fence from wind damage or just, you know, some repair or something, 2 feet doesn't really allow, that's not very safe, is it? If you have a high, like a,
right.
So I would think maybe that would be maybe that's the safety concern they were thinking of, I don't know. Aesthetically, yeah, maybe it doesn't look as nice, I don't know, I don't have that in my subdivision either. And I think you mentioned something that maybe going forward, they don't have these real high retaining walls. I know they're developing the property behind us, and of course it's gradual, but it's downhill. They could make those lots level and then have a retaining wall behind us. I wouldn't like that, but I guess they could do that. But those lots where I live, that's right below the school, and they're developing all that in there right now. Those lots are all kind of gradually sloped downhill, and I think it's probably what this should do. But you mentioned, or someone mentioned, that where this probably is more common is further north, where you got those steep grades, and there, I guess there's no choice. They almost have to do that there, maybe, I don't know.
Walkout basements, there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
there.
Okay, that's all.
So Jerry, your recommendation is to decrease the height of a retaining
Yes.
wall, a permitted retaining wall, and add a view-through fence?
No, I think that's a big thing. I don't think that's something we would decide. I mean, that's something I think we would get more input on, but, because that changes the whole feel of a community. No, my thing is if you limit 4-foot walls, then you put whatever fence you want up. You can put a solid or a view fence, and it goes to the back property. You don't lose anything. No maintenance issue. And you don't run the risk of kids running along a 10-foot. I mean, my neighbor has a 12 or 14-foot retaining wall in his backyard with a fence on top. There's no looking past that. And, you know, it should have never been done. The guy just wanted a flat lot. Didn't need to.
I'm very, very supportive of that. I don't like the idea of having a bungee jumping, you know, encouraging that sort of stuff. So I mean, this makes a lot of work for you, Kelly, unfortunately, but my 2 cents would, well, actually more than 2 cents, would be that we do that and just say it's 4 feet or it's a fence, you know, pick whichever one you fancy, but you can't have both and double decker them.
Sorry, Kelly, but we could still approve something that cleans up the code.
You
and
can
address-
approve it and add a stipulation that would adjust this, and then that's what would be presented to the council is your
That way
adjustment.
immediately you can do what you got to do with fences, but then maybe we send the idea of limiting the height of retaining walls.
Like to the
Even in
council.
the north area, I mean, like I'm saying, you can step a community and it looks great. Park City does it. They don't have 10-foot retaining walls everywhere. But, and developers are smart, they'll figure a way. If there's a way to get to the lot, they'll get to it. So if there's a way to approve this with also maybe a discussion part for the council to discuss, why don't we just, you know, limit retaining walls to 4 feet throughout a community? That really simplifies and beautifies what we got left. If we still have a third and a lot of it's north, that's where it's going to really exist.
So I have a practical question about the Perry Homes development that's already been approved, so this would not apply to them, but that's very relevant to them as you go up towards Beacon Hills. They've got these huge, and most of the resistance from existing residents, or comments at least, were specific to looking at a, you know, cement
And I would
plant.
restrict that to residential. Commercial is such a large pad, you do need to build up retaining, but they usually have all the safety requirements and the right fence, and it's off by itself. So I mean, I wouldn't restrict a commercial site from doing that, but, you know, residential, it's a little easier to handle, because builders can also build to topography and walkout basements and things like that. But did you have a comment, Nathan? You look like you were getting ready to.
I would just say, you just include it as part of your recommendation.
Yeah.
Say, we recommend that retaining walls don't exceed 4 feet. Include your recommendation of a total height of a fence, and we go from there.
Okay. So,
because that's the key. The key is, you know, whenever you're dealing with a fence, is that total height, right? So the two together, as you know.
Yeah, so we could say 10, which would include that retaining wall in there, which they would be maxed out at 4 feet, because the fence has to be 6, right, in most cases.
So if you go back to your table, can we use the row within the table to be a stipulation, and then we make a change to row 3? No, it's 4. Oh, no, it's 3. Yeah. Would that work? Would that be okay?
Does that work for you, Heather? It's, okay, great. I'm like, as long as it works for her, it works for me. She's the one writing down the minutes.
Yeah, so in the addendum, it's section 3, retaining walls, and it's A. Should be a...
Like in the staff report?
Or just in the package, you know, the
Right.
thing that gets appended, the actual code that you've written out.
Oh, in the exhibit.
Well, I actually just have a technical question, because in that same section 3, and we briefly discussed this, we spoke about under no condition shall we have more than 9 feet in the same vertical plane. So would that still apply, or are we changing that to 10 feet now? Because 4 plus 6.
It would go to 10, so it'd be 6 and 4.
So it's giving them another foot, but not letting them do any retaining walls taller than 4.
Yeah, so maximum on retaining wall would be 4 instead of 6.
As a recommendation.
So would that include if, like on maybe a side, where they don't want a 6-foot fence, that would prohibit them from having a larger retaining wall, even if they want like a shorter 4-foot fence?
Right, it's not like they can have a 10-foot retaining wall, because that's the max height together. They could only have a 4-foot retaining wall.
But keep in mind, somebody could put a 4-foot retaining wall at the end of their property, come in 20 feet, put 4 feet more, and then, you know, like step their yard.
Technically, they can go 4, 4, 4, 4.
Of course.
That's
So if they
what's
do that,
permitted.
then every time a kid falls, he's got 4 feet to hit, and if he's really dumb, he'll fall another 4 feet. By the time he gets to the bottom, he'll still be alive.
Yeah.
But no, so they could still step their yard, they just can't do it all in one big swoop. Like the guy behind my neighbor, he has a huge yard, he could have just stepped it in increments, put the soccer court down here and his pool up here, but instead he just clear-cut that thing.
I have one, not to be pedantic, but just a practical question. How does this apply along some of the arterial roads or even just standard roads? Like on 6000 West, the opposite side of that Patterson development, on the east side of the road, when that eventually gets developed, they'll probably have to put in a retaining wall. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a dip on 6000 West, and on the north side of it, it's probably a 20-foot retaining wall, but it's sloped sensibly.
Okay.
It's not a vertical.
Right up.
How would, if at all, does this apply to, and there are only a few areas where we have roads going into a pretty decent dip. What do people do in that case? And we don't need to boil the ocean tonight on this, by the way, but I'm just asking.
Like when it seems like it's actually required by grading for them to have higher than 4. Maybe you can add, but staff would be able to permit something if needed, like if need be for developers, I don't know.
I'm telling you,
council.
It's been done in worse topography areas than this. They figure it out. They can get a tract area that they step. Instead of taking the lots right to the edge of a cliff, they could step a tract area back and then start their lots. Yeah, they're going to lose a couple lots.
The reason why I'm asking is actually that main arterial sewer line that comes, it's actually to the south of my property between me and Ann Williams. There's that monster sewer line. And when they were doing 6000 West, they actually made a mistake and didn't realize, oops. So there's this exposed manhole that is sort of half protruding into the side of the slope. And when that eventually gets developed, they're going to have to do some fancy footwork.
And I don't think this 4 foot applies to Public Works. Public Works can build a bridge. You know, they can, because they're going to put all the safety stuff in place to protect all of us. And so I'm just talking about residential pre-grading. I don't want, you know, they don't have to pre-grade all those lots. People can build homes that have exposed basements and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's actually would look nicer throughout. Bull River doesn't have a bunch of retaining walls, and it's got a lot of topography. Not just saying. All right, so you want to make that motion? You sound like you understand it.
I'll gladly. I move that the Planning Commission accept the findings and recommend approval of the proposed amendment to Section 3-612, Fences, Walls and Hedges, based on the following findings, and the adjustment would be that residential retaining walls are a maximum of 4 feet high, and that on any vertical plane, the combination of a retaining wall and a fence may not be more than 10 feet. Is that right?
Oh, it's perfect.
Okay, do I have a second?
Well, I would second that, since it's perfect.
Just a comment before the voting. Can we separate residential versus not residential within this motion? Because this code applies for both, doesn't it?
Yes, you can specify it for residential.
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Yeah, so we'll amend his,
He didn't say that in the motion, did he?
no, we'll just add it to his motion that will not apply to Public Works or commercial properties.
Seth, I just pause for a very long time before I complete motions. No. Do you need me to say anything, or is that okay? Okay.
All right, let's go ahead. Claude?
Yes.
Audrey?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yes.
And Seth?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, we're down to item 5, Planning Commission and staff communication items. Anything you wanted to go over there? Just telling us what our next meetings are.
Well, we have another city council meeting next week on May 4th, and then 2 weeks later, and then Our next meeting is, for Planning Commission, is May 25th. We don't have anything on the agenda yet for that. And I hope I can cancel it because I will not be here.
I think that's my wife's birthday too, so.
Well, maybe we'll hope and pray that we can cancel it and just go to June, but it really just depends on applications that we get in, so.
Any updates on the container?
The shipping containers, I need a little bit. Erin's been in and out, and I would like to sit down and talk to her about just the possibilities, because she was the one instigating most of the conversations, so.
I thought it was all good comments everybody gave, by the way.
That seems like the answer to our affordable housing, though.
Hey, if you stack them, they're pretty cool.
I saw that up in Salt Lake. They did an entire farm building. It was fascinating. Yeah, it was really fascinating.
It's gonna look like Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
We have a container home in Flagstaff that sold for $1.5 million.
You're kidding me.
All the containers. And one of the containers is a swimming pool elevated.
Wow.
They cut the top off. I thought containers was supposed to be an affordable method. Okay. Do I have a motion? Oh, so we're good?
You're good.
Hey, are
Yes.
they still planning on filling that lake? Do you know? So next spring, or they're doing it this time?
So last I heard is the park opening was a year behind. I don't know where they are filling this.
It looked like it got a lot more extensive than the original plan. So,
Could be.
all right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone. See you in June.